Hey everybody, we're live with the Darkstream, and tonight we're going to talk about what Donald Trump has been doing in the last 4 days. I have to say that he's really off to a simply incredible start. We talked about it a little bit last night, but I woke up this morning and I looked at the headlines, and the first thing I thought was, wow, I can't believe he's keeping up this pace. And the more that I thought about it, then I remembered a talk that Newt Gingrich had given a few days ago, and Gingrich knows what's going on. And somebody says winning. I mean, are you tired of the winning yet? I don't think any of us are. I have not seen Americans this excited about a right-wing presidents since Ronald Reagan. I mean, it's just amazing, especially when you consider how unenthusiastic so many of the conservatives and the Cuckservatives were. They're all starting to come around now. National Review is starting to. I mean, Dennis Prager at National Review was talking about how the Second Civil War and conservatives haven't fought the left and this sort of thing. And so, that's the amazing thing is, that's what a leader does. A leader brings people in and leads them, right into it. And so, anyhow, so it's exciting. But what's interesting to me, and what struck me this morning when I had a chance to sort of stop and think about what Donald Trump is doing, is that I remembered that Newt Gingrich had made a reference to the OODA loop, and now what the OODA loop is it's a fighter pilot. It's an aerial combat concept that was developed by Colonel John Boyd, very famous, one of the greatest American military strategists of all time. And what OODA stands for is observe, orient, decide, and act. And you can imagine how this features in to fighter combat, because you're flying around, and and first you have to observe where the enemy is. You have to orient yourself in relative position to him. And then you need to decide what you're going to do and act. And what Boyd noticed was that in aerial combat, whoever was able to go through that process almost always won. Because whoever is thinking faster, whether they're observing faster, whether they're deciding faster, whether they're more able to orient themselves, or whether they're able to act faster, regardless, whoever's able to go through that loop faster and more often, more repetitively than the other person is usually going to shoot them down. Now, there's a lot of people that are dubious about the application of OODA, especially to infantry combat. Lieutenant Colonel Tom Kratman, who's one of Castelia's authors and my co-editor of Riding the Red Horse, I think mostly horseshit is how he describes it. But that's okay. Applying an aerial combat concept to ground combat, we can see where that might not work. But here's where it gets interesting. I was reading this book rather closely, MAGA Mindset. It's by Mike Cernovich. Castelia House publishes it, and it's a very small book, but there is a amazing amount of astute observations in here. And the important one with relation to this is the discussion of the media cycle. And Cernovich does it. White beta male, I'm going to block you if you don't stop with this bullshit gamma stuff. So just give it up. Anyhow, so the 3-day media cycle, they talk about a 24-hour news cycle, but that's not really the important one. I used to be in the media. I was a syndicated columnist, nationally syndicated columnist for Chronicle Features and for Universal Press Syndicate. And there's a whole process that the news takes. First, you've got the breaking news. That happens immediately, and it happens over the course of the first day. And then you've got the context, which is, what does this mean? We know this happened. This is when the talking heads start to tell us, how important it is or not. And that takes anywhere from, the context takes anywhere from 1 to 3 days. Then you have the analysis, and the analysis can take up to 2 weeks. If you recall, I've talked on the blog about the New York Times and some other media organizations contacting me about the alt-right. Well, it took them weeks to do that from the time that they decided to do the story. It took them a while longer to do the alt-right story because they didn't really know anything about it other than something to do with Richard Spencer. So this takes time. Analysis can be anywhere from, I would say normally, from 2 days to 2 weeks. And then what you have, this is what Cernovich talks about quite a bit in MAGA mindset, is the reaction. So you have the media. First they do the story. Then you have the context for the story, the analysis of the story, and then people react to that. And then the media starts a news cycle with they cover the reaction to the previous story. So this process takes time, and this is how the media leverages its power, and this is how the media propagandizes the public, because what they're doing at each stage of the process, they are telling you what to think, especially at the context and analysis stages. Now, what Donald Trump is doing is he is effectively applying, think of it as a metaphor, you don't have to think of it as directly, but he is effectively applying the concept of the OODA loop to the media cycle. And so what he is doing is, in OODA terms, they talk about getting inside the other guy's OODA loop. Well, Donald Trump is inside the media's media cycle. And so they're not even able to get past the breaking news. They can't even get into the context before he gives them new breaking news that they have to cover. And it was really interesting because I noticed a comment from the Washington Post today, and it said, "We've all been drinking from a fire hose since noon last Friday." So what do they mean to that? Why are they? And this is the tone of this article is just very bitchy and complaining. In fact, they were talking about they listed 11 things that you should be paying attention to, but you're not. But they're not. They haven't been able to pay attention to them because they're all paying attention to something else. Now, some people have talked about how the press secretary is distracting things with the crowd size and stuff. That's all fine and all, but that is not going to work over time. They'll learn not to jump for the hey squirrel, hey shiny, or whatever. But what they're not going to be able to do is they're not going to be able to do with Trump getting inside their media cycle. And so because what's happening is, if you think about it, you got the breaking news, the context, the analysis. Well, first he comes out with the executive orders dealing with Obamacare, and so they begin their whole process. And keep in mind, this is a big machinery. We're talking about hundreds, if not thousands, of people involved. They gear up their whole machinery, and they're all getting ready to tell America what to think about Trump's actions on Obamacare. But they've only begun to do all they've done is the breaking news. They are moving on to the context. But before they can even get the context story out, he comes out with 5 more executive orders that are dealing with the EPA and shutting down the hiring freeze. So that they're getting hit with this breaking news before they can even put the Obamacare into context and analysis. Then, and they didn't wait the next day. I don't know if it was related, but there were a number of people yesterday who were complaining that, Trump is stabbing us in the back. He hasn't done anything about immigration. Look, he's doing this stuff with Obamacare, and he's doing this stuff with the EPA. Who cares about the EPA? And so And I said, look, shut up. Just the guy's already done all of these, taken all of these actions, and you're complaining that he hasn't gotten to your pet issue yet on day 4 or day 3, whatever it was. And so, but whether he was reacting to his supporters being worried about immigration, I mean, literally hours after people started worrying about that, we suddenly had these leaks about, oh, guess what? He's going to be releasing executive orders about immigration tomorrow. And boom, he did it. And so, and again, the media hadn't gotten to the point of even discussing the context of the EPA actions, the pipeline actions, and so forth. They hadn't even begun to get to the analysis of the Obamacare stuff. If you notice, today, there's almost no discussion of Obamacare. They can't keep up. He is maintaining a pace that they're not able to function with. Now, is this all stuff that's been pre-prepared, and so he's not going to be able to maintain that? I doubt it, because I think that this is a strategy. I am, definitely sensing that his chief strategist Steve Bannon is involved in this. Now, a number of people last summer were under a lot of people were suggesting, there's even an article somewhere talking about how Trump was taking my advice from SJWs Always Lie because he was refusing to apologize and so forth. I said at the time, and I'll still say, I don't think that's true, because I don't think that he'd ever read that book, although I know some people around him have. And so what I do think, though, is that I think that somebody in the Trump campaign is paying very close attention to strategy. And what we're seeing, and the reason I call it third generation politics, is, remember the book I showed you the other day, the Fourth Generation Warfare Handbook, this one. Fourth Generation Warfare refers to the 4 generations of styles of war that have been fought since the Treaty of Westphalia. And so the first generation was Napoleonics. So basically, 2 sides line up and they shoot at each other. The second phase, the second generation of warfare, was what sort of the Civil War, World War I, trench warfare, that sort of thing, where the firepower had gotten to the point where you couldn't just stand there and shoot at each other, but it was still a battlefield action, and that's where artillery and massive amounts of firepower was the determining factor. Now, I think this may be a stretch for some, but I think it actually applies pretty well, is the media operates on something that is akin to the second generation warfare model. Basically, they win by their superior information firepower. They are able to overwhelm anyone, and they are able to essentially dictate opinion. There's a reason they call them opinion leaders. They can dictate opinion to millions of people around the world. And so the thing that is interesting about this is, in the same way that the second generation of war, the trench warfare, was defeated by the third generation of maneuver warfare. And maneuver warfare is a concept that was became U.S. Marine Corps doctrine back in the 80s. William Lind, the guy who wrote that book, also wrote, he's considered the father of maneuver warfare. And they, when he describes is the Germans figured out a way to neutralize the firepower aspect of the trenches of the Allies. And so, and that's exactly, if you think about it, that's exactly what Donald Trump has done. By increasing the pace, he has functionally neutralized the media artillery. And so, because he's just the same way that the German stormtroopers were able to penetrate the trenches and break through before the French and the British artillery could be moved and zoomed in and dropped on them, they were able to quickly get across, penetrate, break through, and then exploit. And we saw, obviously, in World War II, we saw the same thing taken to the next level with armor in a strategy that was called blitzkrieg, lightning war. And what we're seeing, and I think you're going to see this term starting to be applied to Donald Trump and the Trump administration strategy, is that it's basically a media blitzkrieg, and so it's definitely a new generation of political warfare, and it requires intelligence, it requires skill, and it requires a very clear focus on objectives, which, interestingly enough, is actually something that real third generation warfare required on the part of the troops. That's why if you read a Marine Corps manual on maneuver warfare, if you read Lynn's maneuver warfare handbook, then you can see exactly why they talk about the need for cadre of highly motivated, intelligent junior officers who are able to not only see the weak points, hit them, break through, and create these openings that are exploited. And so now you say, okay, well, who is Trump creating these opportunities for? Okay, fine, he's breaking through, he's using his executive orders, he's using this media blitzkrieg to punch through. Well, in this analogy, it's the Republican legislature, the House and the Senate, that are clearly the Wehrmacht, as it were, the regular army, that is expected to follow in after Trump punches through with these executive orders. I believe, if my take on his strategy here is correct, what he is going to do is he is going to bring in the Republican House and the Republican Senate to cement the changes that he's making using the executive orders as a way to punch through the media and democratic resistance. So, I could be wrong. I just thought about this morning, but I really do think that what we're seeing out of Donald Trump and his team is a new sort of third generation politics that is specifically designed to strategically nullify and neutralize the overwhelming power of the mainstream media and their allies in the Democratic Party. And this is something that someone says, how does 4GW come into it? That's us. We're the 4GW. But we'll get into that at a future point. But the thing that's important to understand is that we can learn from the God Emperor. He is leading us not only as a nation, but he's showing loser Republicans how to win. He is showing us that we don't need to back up, we don't need to bow down, we don't need to be afraid, and we don't need to dance, and we don't need to impress the media. He is demonstrating how we neutralize them and render them irrelevant. So, anyhow, if you want to know more about these concepts, you can see my shirt, Infogalactic. Check out infogalactic.com. We've got all this, it's basically it's like Wikipedia, only we actually try to focus on what's true rather than what's SJW approved. And it'll be interesting to see if Trump keeps up this pace. Now, obviously, Trump's pattern is not to push. Trump's pattern is to push hard, take a break, kick back, relax, look for another weak spot, and then do it again. And so the important thing, like in the campaign, don't get discouraged when it's a lull period. That's when you regroup, that's when you rearm, that's when you stop and you think about, okay, where do we go next? And that's just like weightlifting, you have to hit it hard, but then you also need your recovery time. And so anyhow, thank you very much for tuning in. Tomorrow night, it's going to be a little bit earlier because I'm going to be going on Stefan Molyneux's show at tomorrow at the time that I usually do this. So I'll do this earlier during the day. I actually plan to do these pretty much every day. So if stop by the blog, voxday.blogspot.com, I usually mention that I'm going to do it and give a hint about what the subject's going to be. It's not always going to be politics, and so we'll be discussing everything from different books and so forth. And the other thing you might want to look for tomorrow is check out the UNS review. I actually did an interview with one of the top Israeli politicians. It was a kind of a fascinating interview with him, and so I will look forward to seeing you all soon. Thanks very much.